Hey guys, we're back again for another Reshape short. Joining us today is Patrice Conxicoeur, who is the CEO of HSBC Asset Management in Southeast Asia. Now, Patrice, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Patrice, now tell us a bit more about your job. Do you mind introducing what you do at HSBC Asset Management?
So, I am in charge of our asset management business in Singapore and in Southeast Asia, which means looking after the investments of a very diverse group of investors that can range from individual investors, such as you and me, to every kind of institutional and corporate investors, such as corporate treasurers who have cash to invest, insurance companies who have money to invest perhaps for longer, central banks and pension plans, similarly, who have investment needs. Everybody needs to invest at some point of their existence, be it as an individual or as an institution, and we're here to help them.
Brilliant. And right now, you've been so invested into sustainable investments, and that's what you're sharing with us. The investments for good, investments for the good of all mankind. That's what you'll be sharing with us at Reshape Summit. Can you tell us what is or what are sustainable investments?
So sustainable investments, and that previously was called often responsible investments, although it's not quite the same thing. This is really about applying considerations to our investments to mitigate exposure to risks and risks that are in the energy, in the social, in the governance sphere, and whenever they will impact environmental, social, and governance issues. Um, and we use engagement as a part of the investment decisions that we make. And this really starts with research um, uh, and integrating in our research ESG considerations, so environmental, social, and governance considerations, exactly at the same level of importance, if you want, as we integrate financial considerations such as the solvability of a company, for instance, or its profitability. Um, it's very tempting to think about those factors as purely risk factors. I think it goes far beyond this in the sense, first of all, that everyone is on a journey, every organization is on a journey. Um, and we now have enough research to show that those ESG factors can be a pretty powerful catalyst for
Yeah.
performance. And also, as one of my colleagues, one of our leading portfolio managers was telling me not so long ago. So this is a team that makes long-term equity investments, very stable investments with very, very low turnover in the portfolio. Um, and he was making this point, which I think is extremely thoughtful. He was saying, look, if your investment horizon is pretty much forever, which is of course a slight exaggeration, but there you go. If you have a very long-term investment horizon, then sustainability or ESG factors, if you want to drill a little bit deeper, is almost the only thing you should consider.
Wow, that's a
Um,
strong statement.
because yes, of course, valuation is important. Yes, of course, the price-earning ratio and the EBITDA is important, and all of this, etc. But the information you get from this is only really valid for a few months or a few quarters at most.
Yeah.
If your investment horizon is much longer, uh, ESG is really what you should spend most of your research resources on. Um, and as often when trying to explain something which is a bit new or a bit complex, think about it in the extreme to bring some light. And I think this was a really interesting light to bring to it.
Uh, You speak of ESG investments, and I was lucky enough to watch a few videos on HSBC's channel on sustainable healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of governments have been looking into. I'm imagining it's a long-term process when it comes to a government trying to make a decision on few things. But why should companies care about sustainable healthcare? Why should they be bothered? I mean, from an investment point of view, it makes perfect sense, right? But why else should it make a difference to them?
Well, the cost of healthcare have been climbing in the rich world at least, but not only in the rich world, for decades now. And much of it is has resulted in amazing improvements in our well-being in general, life expectancies, and what have you. Um, but it just cannot go on climbing forever. Uh,
True.
um, there's only so much share of GDP that can be spent on this. And as any comparison between various health systems in countries will show you, there are different ways to be for a health system and health spending to be more or less efficient. And in that sense, I think there's a different light thrown there on what sustainability can be. A sustainable healthcare system or a sustainable healthcare company ultimately needs to be affordable. Um, Again, think about this in the extreme. Um, if you tomorrow invented a potion for eternal life, but nobody can afford it, what good would it be? I'm sorry, Steve, I can't hear you anymore.
Sorry, my fault. I mentioned that it would be equal to a grain of sand in the desert while you were sitting in the Amazon. So, if you can't reach it, yeah, what's the point?
And more to the point, really. When we think about sustainable healthcare, so this point about affordability, I think, is crucial. But affordability is not just a single number, as in the price of a drug. This needs to be thought through um, in terms of the whole value chain. So an important proportion of health costs, for instance, is time spent in hospitals.
True.
Um, so any treatment or drug or combination of drugs that helps to shorten that actually makes a very significant contribution to reducing the cost of healthcare. Um, um, an, Another example is: are we talking about drugs or medicine or treatment protocols that are dealing with symptoms or causes?
True.
Obviously, the economic consequences are radically different, right? And then
Yes.
thinking more widely, are we talking about healthcare for rich people or for the whole of humanity?
That's a good question. So touching on that point here, what can our listeners expect to learn from you at Reshape?
So I think the panel we're going to talk about is sustainability for the good of mankind and business, right?
Right.
And so obviously there's plenty to discuss, but I think this really starts. If you take a few steps back, we know about this evolution of capitalism from pure profit maximization to what is now called stakeholder capitalism, and which in truth isn't really new. I mean, this was when I was an economics student, that was called enlightened self-interest, and at heart, it was the same thing. Um, so, and it is really about this unpicking of our economic reality, where we currently operate in a world where many an economic success, many a fortune was built or is being built on what economists call market failures,
True.
um, with, of course, climate change being rightly described as the ultimate market failure. Um, so, shall we eventually define sustainability as the end of market failures? Um, um, that I think is a fantastic goal. Um, and if we start about genuinely inclusive economic success, or call that enlightened economics, that's very exciting. And if you follow the ideas that every rightly designed ESG program follows, this is what we're trying to go for.
Awesome.
Most of us in the financial industry struggle to explain to our younger children or our elderly parents what we do for a living. Um, what better way to engage with them than this one?
And rightfully so. We've got this amazing speaker called Zahra Al Halali from Australia. She's a Gen Z advocate, and one part of her advocacy is actually on ESG investments by governments and by corporations. And I'm grateful that you're already speaking of it. I know a lot of our young Gen Z generation are a lot more involved and a lot more engaged on this topic. And I think it's a brilliant talk to have and bring their ideas into the forefront while you're doing the heavy lifting of the work that you're doing. Patrice, last question for you. What are the two words that define Reshape to you?
Two words: ideas and exchanges, or perhaps experiences and views.
Ideas and experiences, ideas and views. I love that. Thank you. And what is the one thing you'd like to take away from Reshape this year?
Oh, I'm sure I will learn a lot. I'll listen carefully, and I will sure learn a lot. So I'm not worried about taking anything away. I'm sure I will receive a lot more than I will give, and I'm
Thank
grateful in
you.
advance.
Thank you so much. Guys, you've been listening to Patrice Conxicoeur from HSBC Asset Management. I do advise and also recommend that you catch a session at reshapesummit.com. If you haven't registered, register now and hear more from the lovely gentleman on ESG investments, sustainable investments, and why we should be investing for the better of all mankind. Cheers. Thank you so much, Patrice. Great having you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you.
Bye bye.